We have engaged the Borg.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Waz Reviews. If you watched my video for Star Trek Klingon, you may remember that I mentioned another similar game that came out in the same year, Star Trek Borg. Like Star Trek Klingon, Star Trek Borg is an interactive movie that, well, probably with the fraction of a budget of a typical episode of Star Trek, maintains the overall Star Trek feel and comes across like a lost episode. While Star Trek Klingon is different in that you look at the Star Trek universe from the eyes of a Klingon, Star Trek Borg is a little more standard. You're playing as a Starfleet officer on a Starfleet ship, which we've seen in Star Trek before. Nevertheless, it's a Star Trek game, and I'm on board with playing it. I can't believe I made that pun.
Oh, we few, we happy few, we band of Borg.
First, let's take a look at the set, shall we? Like Star Trek Klingon, Star Trek Borg comes with 3 discs and a manual in a nice big jewel case. The discs are labeled Disc 1, Disc 2, and Disc 3, the Picard Dossier. Now I know what you're thinking. Star Trek Klingon's 3rd disc was the Klingon Language Lab, with the game on the first 2 discs. Surely Star Trek Borg must be set up the same way, right? Well, not exactly. From what I can tell, the game is spread out over 3 discs. Why Disc 3 is called the Picard Dossier, I have no idea, because I saw nothing special on that disc other than the game. Needless to say, it's a bit misleading, but not enough for me to airlock the game. Before I get into the actual plot of the game, I'm going to talk about the gameplay. The gameplay is roughly the same as Star Trek Klingon, an interactive movie where you have a first-person view. The other characters interact with you as if they're talking to you face-to-face for that sweet immersive experience. At certain points of the game, you reach decision points where you can click on something to interact with or do nothing at all. If you make a mistake, you go back to before the decision point to try again. Double-clicking during the game will pause the game, and you can scan certain areas on screen with your tricorder. While a similar feature was in Star Trek Klingon as a nice but not required feature, Star Trek Borg forces you to use your tricorder to get clues to advance the story. In fact, in some places, you have to scan and receive certain pieces of information before the game even lets you move on. One more thing before we get started. I want to apologize for the quality of the video footage you're about to see. Unlike Star Trek Klingon, Star Trek Borg was hard to get working even on a virtual machine, requiring a lower resolution and 16-bit colors. There are these weird lines in the video footage that are just there. So, apologies, but I did collect footage to make this video. So with that, let's get ready to engage the Borg. It's about 10 years after the Battle of Wolf 359, so about Season 6 of Voyager and about 2 years after the end of DS9. The Borg have returned and they're heading to Earth again, because that worked out so well the last time.
I put them all to sleep.
On a ship that looks like the Enterprise D from the outside but looks like Voyager on the inside, we assume the role of a Starfleet cadet, Kaylin Furlong, who likes being fashionably late.
0730 means 0730, cadet. Sit down.
Well, that's a great impression there. I think she likes me. So the ship you're on is recalled to Earth to defend against the Borg, so that means all non-essential cadets are ordered off the ship. However, you have a personal stake in this game, since your father, Lieutenant Ralph Furlong, was lost in the Battle of Wolf 359, so you want to avenge his death against the Borg. Sound a little familiar? The ship's captain has denied your request to stay on board, so it's time to pack up when an unexpected visitor arrives.
I imagine you've heard of me, though, Q. It's short for Q.
So Q decides to give you a chance to change history for the better, to right what once went wrong, with Q as a guide that only you can see. Wait a minute. Yeah, this whole episode is essentially a Quantum Leap episode, and about 5 years before Scott Bakula even made his Star Trek debut. Nice!
You're not afraid of a little space-time continuum meddling, are you, cadet?
Q takes you back to the Battle of Wolf 359 on your father's ship, the Righteous, right at the moment the ship explodes, because it's not like Kaylin is scarred enough as it is. We get a good look at Dad for the first time.
This is him, isn't it? Well, I can see the family resemblance.
You may remember him from the Next Gen episode Imaginary Friend, where he played the father of a girl whose imaginary friend almost destroyed them all.
The Kyushu's coming on strong. Melbourne and Saratoga have lost power.
Tolstoy, Kyushu, Saratoga, Melbourne. Recognize the names?
Well, yeah, actually.
The Tolstoy. The Kyushu. The Melbourne.
I was on the Saratoga at Wolf 359.
As it turns out, the Chief of Security, Lieutenant Sprint, was killed about 4 hours before the battle, prompting this inexperienced ensign to make a couple of rookie mistakes that gets everyone killed. Q has you replace Sprint, a Bajani, while Q replaces the EMH knockoff about 4 hours before the battle.
Chief Medical Officer Dr. Thaddeus Quint. He actually tried to save Sprint's life, but as you can see, he failed, the old goat.
And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, Q's a real jerk in this game. I mean, he's still fun to watch, but man, he's even more callous than usual. Jean-Luc got off easy.
Contraire, mon capitaine! He's back!
But now our tenure as Lieutenant Sprint starts. A Borg has beamed onto the bridge. What do we do? Now, I remember my Star Trek pretty well, and I know that phasers may or may not work on Borg. So let's try the tricorder.
Excuse me, am I mistaken? But isn't there a Borg on the bridge trying to control the ship? What are you gonna do? Scan it to death?
I do love Q's roastings in this game. It almost makes up for his being even more of a jerk than his usual self.
Try again.
So phasering the Borg works for about 2 seconds before he attacks you, and Q hyposprays him.
Quint wasn't clever enough to think of it. Good thing I am.
Well, that was traumatic. Good thing the ship's counselor... Wait, Counselor Biscuits?
Biscuits?
That's what I love about this game, and Star Trek Klingon as well. The cast is made up of actual Star Trek actors. Now, I think it's kind of interesting that this guy is playing a ship's counselor, but he makes it work. Captain Andropov, who gives off a Beau Bridges vibe for some reason, wants someone to get the Borg off his bridge, so Ensign Targus goes to move him. Why can't they just beam him off the bridge? Isn't that easier? Well, it turns out the Borg was only mostly dead because, like a horror movie, Q tells you to shoot her, but that's clearly a bad decision.
If I told you to jump into a Signian vortex, would you do it? You're a sentient being of sorts. Try using this. Well, I hope we're learning something from our little mistakes.
And we can't just shoot at the Borg, so let's try the console instead.
Definitely dead this time.
Then get him definitely off my bridge this time.
And Dad even gives you some words of encouragement.
Good shooting.
How about quick thinking, Quint? Good work, Quint. Nobody ever gives me any credit for anything I do.
That's because we don't like you, Quint.
So, like Q in his natural state, everybody hates Q, or Quint, here as well. Except Counselor Baraka.
I still like you.
He kissed me.
I never kissed you with a beard before.
After reconfiguring your station, you make your way to the computer core to meet up with the captain and Dad.
Mr. Sprint, I am a very tolerant captain, except when it comes to punctuality. I suggest you become more familiar with this ship's layout so you don't keep us waiting again. Do I make myself clear?
Well, there's Kaylin being fashionably late again. It turns out the ship picked up a little buddy when that Borg beamed over, which we're better off leaving alone. This implies there's another Borg on the loose, so you and Dad set out to look for him. Now that we're on Disc 2, I think it's a good time to address the uniform issue, because this is Star Trek, and where would the franchise even be if we didn't quibble about minor things? Most of the cast in this game wears the early DS9 or Voyager uniforms, despite the fact that this game at the beginning takes place after DS9, where the uniforms look like this, and the fact that the bulk of the game takes place during Wolf 359, where the uniforms look like this. I get that this game came out in 1996 during DS9's 4th season, so the game makers wouldn't have known about the uniform change. But the uniforms they wear in the past should have been the TNG uniforms. The uniforms they're wearing in this game wouldn't even be standard for another 2 years, and even then, a lot of officers were still wearing the older uniforms. It just seems like a massive oversight that could have been avoided. I know it's a small thing to quibble about, but it's Star Trek fans who are playing this game. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? Anyways, it's time for a father-son mission, tracking down a Borg terrorizing the ship. While scanning the ship, Dad gets a brilliant idea.
Okay, one of us has to go, but somebody should stay, in case he went through and doubled back. Whoa, 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 whoa. I said one of us, I didn't say you.
But he'll play you for who gets to go first. Something similar also appeared in Star Trek Klingon, only in this game, you can't win because choosing one of the hands will earn you a father-son assimilation. Even Q tells you the game is rigged.
Oh, and by the way, the game is rigged. Didn't you hear what I told you? He cheats. You can't win.
Rather, the correct answer is to punch your father in the chin. And we reach one of the hardest, and by that I mean stupidest, decisions of the game. You have to take Dad's phaser and remodulate it, like in the shows. However, you have a split second to click on the tiniest part of the screen. You see that little button? Now you don't.
3 hours later.
Ah, finally!
Good idea. Retuning the phaser to a higher EM band frequency. You're right, they probably already adapted to the old ones. Nice shot. What did you think I was gonna do, cheat?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
Didn't you hear what I told you? He cheats.
We snag a Borg implant, but now what do we do with it? Well, we can't just plug it into the ship's computer. Who knows what it'll do? Let's plug it into Ensign Targus instead. This is gonna end well. But we better make sure she can't walk around doing Borg things just in case.
You could have waited till I sat down.
I could have, but I didn't.
Shield. Modulate mutations.
Okay, so we have to remodulate the shield. Well, it's not like we need to have her connected to the collective anymore. Okay, let's just leave her there while we remodulate the shields.
We are resistances. You will be assimilated.
Oh, great. Well, this is good. Well, I just don't know what to do.
Oh, great. Now I'm dead.
So I guess we have to grab the node.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Hey, will you lay off, Q? Let me make choices!
No. You're not dead. You're unconscious. In a Bajani pain trance.
Yeah, from this point on, the game doesn't let you forget that you're a Bajani and can go into a Bajani pain trance.
I've never seen anyone go into a Bajani pain trance before.
I kinda wish it wasn't a major part of the plot that you have some special ability never before seen in Trek to get you through this. I mean, I've seen something similar in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, but whatever. I mean, we already have Q helping us. So the Borg implant in the computer core is still rewriting ship's code, and that implant just got fried. So you, Dad, and Ensign Targus have to go over to the Borg cube to get a fresh implant. By the way, there's a whole backstory with Dad, Ensign Targus, and Sprint that I didn't really get into, but all you need to know is that they've been friends for a long time. Disc 3 has you beaming over to the Borg ship with some rather foggy ambiance. Seriously, I don't remember Borg ships being this foggy. Well, there's a couple of Borg walking this way, and if my Star Trek knowledge is correct, which it often is, we're better off not shooting the Borg outright.
What are you looking at, Cadet?
Moving further into the ship, we happen upon a familiar-looking console, which Dad theorizes that it's because they've already assimilated one Starfleet officer.
Well, most of the Borg we've seen have direct interface abilities. Why would they need something like this?
Hey, remember, they've already totally assimilated one Starfleet officer.
And because you're security, you have to be the one to disarm it. So what's the code? You see, that's one of my major complaints with this game. Star Trek Klingon was a pretty linear game. You can go through the story, and if you're paying attention, you can get all the clues you need to solve the puzzles. Star Trek Borg, on the other hand, hides clues you need in story paths that are sure to fail, forcing you to make some arguably stupid decisions that you otherwise wouldn't make. In this case, you actually need to be assimilated in order to collect the code for the console, and then have Q reset the timeline to use that code. It's annoying, and I'm sure many Trekkie got stumped on this part. Once you have the code and enter it into the computer, you get an overwrite code, and Dad gets the bright idea to steal an implant off a passing Borg. This has interesting consequences.
I'm sorry.
No. No!
Stay back. I'm warning you.
Target stuff.
Don't you understand? It's not my fault. I had to. Should have known. You were there with me! You should have known! I'm sorry.
It's not your fault. You were right.
The only good Borg.
We needed a live one.
So we actually need a live Borg. Well, I'm sure we can find one that wants to help out. Or that.
Sprint, what have you done?
Oh, smart move. Sending yourself into a Bajani trance before you get Borgified.
Sprint managed to maintain individuality after being assimilated with this game's go-to explanation.
He sent himself into a Bajani pain trance.
So you go back aboard your ship, disarm the Borg device, and now we have Sprint the friendly Borg a part of the crew. That's right, before 7 of 9, there was Sprint. Dad starts talking about how proud he is of his son, and Q proceeds to insult you right to your face.
Did you hear that, Sprint? You don't want to hear Furlong talking about his whiny brat now, do you?
And we reach the best option in the game.
You hit me. Picard never hit me. I'm not Picard.
Now, I'm gonna level with you. There's an even better option here.
If you just didn't try so hard to make everyone dislike you.
Spare me the psychology, counselor.
And you know what? Q's been a jerk the entire game. It couldn't have happened to a nicer Q.
Let me give you some free advice. If you want to be liked, try making yourself likable.
But now we've arrived at Wolf 359, and the attack is in full swing. Q announces we're back at the beginning of the game, so now's our chance to save Dad and change history for the better. Ah, here's that Borg again. Now, this game has some dumb decision points, but this one by far is the dumbest. Oh, did you think you had to click on one of the green options before you? No, you have to wait until this stupid little highlight stops, click that, and enter the override code you got from the Borg ship. Unless you know about that, which chances are you won't unless you look it up, which I did, you'll get yet another lecture from Q. But at least he'll give you another chance.
But I'm going to give you another chance. It's not that I care. I just want to see how it turns out.
But if you enter that code correctly, you've won the game!
The Borg cube is pulling away, sir. It's ignoring us completely as if we weren't here.
It thinks we've been vaporized.
And then Q drops some major spoilers for Next Gen's Best of Both Worlds.
The Enterprise, utilizing the emergency transporters on the shuttlecraft, will recapture their Borgified Picard and stop the Borg incursion just in the nick of time.
Q reveals himself to the crew that he's not Dr. Quint, and you as not Sprint. Sprint was always fated to die, but now you're reunited with your father, who recognizes your older self.
So, you were just pretending to be Sprint. Why? Who are...
But Q never expected you to actually succeed, despite the fact that he's the one that kept giving you multiple chances. But now he's worried about the timeline. It's a funny time to be worried about the timeline, eh, Q?
This is no time to argue about time. We don't have the time.
If the Righteous survives, history will be changed. So Q just makes everyone disappear for 10 years, allowing the timeline to remain unaffected. But what about that Dr. Quint?
Where am I? What's going on? Wait, I don't think I want to know.
But now those pesky Borg are still after Earth, and even though everyone is 10 years behind, they still know a lot about the Borg. Which could probably be easily picked up just by watching various episodes of Star Trek. But you have your father back, a new ship, and a new mission to protect Earth. Engage. And that's Star Trek Borg, the second and last of the interactive Star Trek games. So, how good is it? Before I start on the WAS grading scale, let's get the ungraded categories out of the way. The game's difficulty is mildly hard. It's definitely harder than Star Trek Klingon. Where Star Trek Klingon was a more linear experience where you had to pay attention to clues, Star Trek Borg requires you to explore different story paths in order to find the correct answers. The tricorder helps, but I wish it was a nice extra feature to learn more about the Star Trek universe rather than a required game component. I would also recommend having a walkthrough nearby for this one. While you can figure out most puzzles in this game, others are frustrating if you don't know what you're looking for. Keep a walkthrough up in a separate tab for those particularly annoying problems. And now the graded categories. Like Star Trek Klingon, the controls are straightforward in some ways and less obvious in others. If I didn't have the game's manual, I wouldn't have known that clicking and double-clicking pauses and resumes the game, and that you use your tricorder when the game is paused. The point-and-click aspect is pretty straightforward, though some decisions require very specific clicks in order to pass. 3rd of 5. Props to this game for having the appearance and ambiance of a Star Trek episode down, from the Starfleet ships to the Borg cube. Like with Star Trek Klingon, I do have to dock points for the lack of easy menus. There are also some minor details that are wrong, like the wrong uniforms for the time period, that I also can't ignore. 3rd of 5. A valiant effort that could have been a little bit better. The game's story is very typically Trek, which isn't a bad thing. There's Q shenanigans, time travel, Borg causing havoc, a story of family and friendship. This wouldn't be out of place for Star Trek at all. It might be a little cliched at times, but overall, the story works and left me feeling satisfied. And of course, bonus points for John Delancey's part in the game. He steals the show. 4th of 5. Still prefer the Star Trek Klingon story, but this was good too. There is more of a learning curve for this game than in Star Trek Klingon. While you can get by in Star Trek Klingon by pointing and clicking your way through it, Star Trek Borg requires you to make use of the tricorder. There isn't a tutorial for this, you just need to know how to access it. Sure, Q helps you out, but I highly recommend looking over the manual before starting this game. Now, what I will say is that Q isn't nearly as punishing as Gowron was in Star Trek Klingon. He doesn't force you to start over if you make the wrong decision. Except at the beginning. 4th of 5. This game is very replayable, mainly because of the different story paths you can take. This is the advantage it has over Star Trek Klingon, which was a much more linear experience. Does the story change in the end? No, but there are interesting things to pick up along the way for each playthrough. 5th of 5. That gives us a score of 19 out of 25, or a 76%. Yes, I made a lot of comparisons to Star Trek Klingon, since they're both similar games. And of the two, I do think Star Trek Klingon is the better game. In fact, without my grading scale, if I gave Star Trek Klingon an A, I would probably give Star Trek Borg an A-. Some aspects of Star Trek Borg annoy me, like getting clues from other story paths. But I still had a lot of fun with this game. It delivers the Star Trek experience, and if you're a Trekkie, whether a gamer or not, you'll probably enjoy this one. More so if you love the Best of Both Worlds or Borg episodes in general. I ran across this game for about $8 a few years back, but I haven't run into it since. If you happen to find this game at a good price and you're a Trekkie who doesn't mind trying to get older software to work, definitely pick this game up. So what do you think? Have you played Star Trek Borg before? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did my review get you interested in this hidden gem? And of course, if you enjoyed this review and haven't checked out my Star Trek Klingon review, definitely give that one a watch. As always, thanks for watching my video. And since you're already here, why not give me a like and subscribe to my channel? Tell your friends! Until next time...
You have my everlasting gratitude.